James watched with growing discomfort as Storm, their normally kind German shepherd, moved to stand next to the baby's cradle again in the evening fell upon their humble at home. The same trend kept happening as it had occurred each night for the last two. Storm's ears angled steeply for weeks. His posture stiffened as he moved forward, and a harsh, continuous growl came from his chest. "James, I don't understand it," whispered to Margaret, his wife, who was standing pressed up to the door of the cherished member had been nursery Storm of their family for a total of 5 years, considering that they brought him back from he had always been at an animal shelter. Exceptionally soft, particularly in the local children who would enthusiastically stop and give him a pet in the evening. Walks when they brought Oliver the baby. Returned home 3 months ago from the hospital, the Storm had been purely protective and kind. He would lie quietly next to the crib when he rests his tail in the afternoon, softly wagging each time Oliver made a sound. But 2 weeks later, something changed. Every night, like clockwork, both today and in the past, Storm would keep watch and growl. The evenings of April were becoming James, and the warmer had carefully examined every time the windows were in the nursery, kept the screens firmly in place, and no indications of any unwanted visits such as squirrels or mice. Storm's behavior continued to persist, concentrated on the same room corner, even while Oliver was asleep. Margaret had gently proposed taking Rush to the vet's office for examination to see if he may be feeling uneasy or anxious that caused him to behave in this manner during the test showed that there was no extraordinary Storm in ideal well-being for a dog's age, the vet clarified. Dogs may respond to modifications in their surroundings that are invisible to humans, such as faint noises or changes in air pressure. James watched for hours, observing Storm's actions and how the dog's roar wasn't hostile, or it appeared more like a threat than a warning. Just as he did when he heard strange sounds, the Storm outside never displayed any hostility toward Oliver, actually presented himself as if attempting to protect the infant from. There was something in that part of the perhaps. We should have someone inspect the room. One evening, Margaret recommended the house. After yet another, her voice was serious. Storm's odd episode behavior recalls the previous autumn when he continued to scratch the kitchen wall. It was discovered that there was a leak. Pipe, she has a point about Storm's instincts within, had already shown itself to be trustworthy. James observed something the following day. Something caused him to pause as he changed. There was a tiny draft in Oliver's diaper, close to the corner where Storm is always concentrated his. It was hardly perceptible, but the infant mobile twirled ever. So could this be what was, just a little bit? Storm dogs that were known to cause trouble were considerate of such matters, and with they have keen hearing and could pick out sounds, significantly more than human perception. As James got ready for sleep, observing Storm uphold he took a watchful stance by the crib and made a choice. He would call in the morning. A house inspector must perform a comprehensive. The something in the nursery was obviously missing, and James, if Storm was attempting to alert them, was committed to learning what it. He extended his hand to pat Storm's head, getting a quick tail wag in return. Even while the dog's gaze remained fixed on that, James, the decent youngster in the corner, said, "Thank you," for his faithful friend's commitment to defending their whatever was causing Storm's family worry that they would discover the truth about not only for their mental well-being, but for Storm's comfort and Oliver's protection. Additionally, the mystery would be resolved shortly. However, James found solace in being aware that their devoted guardian was keeping an eye on their son with such steadfast devotion. Ultimately, dogs tend to sense things for a long time, before anybody could see them, and Storm had repeatedly gained their trust. James spent no time in the morning after that, and dialed the home inspection. As soon as they opened the service, the earliest appointment time they could provide was 3 days away. Felt like an excruciatingly long time. Considering Storm's tenacious behavior, Margaret suggested relocating their bedroom with Oliver's cot for the moment. But James hesitated, worried that it might just conceal whatever problem Storm was attempting to solve, frantically trying to alert them. Roughly all day long, there was an odd pattern to the behavior. Things James had not previously observed. While the dog appeared flawless in the morning, calm in the nursery, frequently taking naps in the sliver of sunshine streaming through the glass, although it was midday. Approached, His manner would progressively change by 400 p.m. A storm would start. Pacing between that and the nursery door, his uneasiness was growing in a secret corner. In the evening, Drew worked close to James from setting up his paperwork at home. That day, he was at the little desk by the nursery, made thorough notes of Storm's behavior in an effort to find any sets off the draft he had previously observed. Appeared more powerful at times, especially when the midday sun, the outside wall was heated because it was an older home. James thought it could have fundamental problems that grew increasingly marked by variations in temperature. Margaret came home from her work as a teacher, regularly when carrying a tiny notebook in which she recorded her inquiries. She had also spoken with the home inspector, with Margaret, her elderly neighbor, who'd spent 40 years living in the house next door. Margaret stated that in the previous large storm, she saw water stains on the wall that backed up to her Oliver's that night. As the storm took his usual stance by the crib, James introduced a stepladder to inspect. The dog studied the corner more intently, carefully, but remained in his position. James used a flashlight to find little fractures in the paint on the ceiling extending from the corner like a web. When he placed his hand on he sensed a little tremor in the wall. Little perceptible, but undoubtedly, Oliver slept soundly through it there. His small chest was rising and sinking. The baby mobile above moves with every breath. The draft caused his crib to spin idly, generating movable shadows on the walls. James saw the eyes of Storm sort out these shadows, but the dog's that corner was always the focus. His growl gets louder every time the vibration appeared to increase. Margaret's time that night, examining potential reasons on her tablet, speaking softly as she expressed her ideas to James. It can be a loose pipe or anything else. Settling of the structure or even anything, she whispered. Electronic. But what concerns me is that Storm only responds at. There must be something at night that changes when the house cools down following at sunset. They agreed to alternate stays, up to see the circumstances. During James's observation at midnight, he observed something strange. The mild draft had intensified, with a slight sound that wasn't quite not a whistle, but a faint rushing sound that appeared to come from inside the Storm's ears. Perked up with every new he growled, while keeping the same safeguarding tone. James took Oliver in his arms. Close as he moved about the room, Storm was standing as he approached the corner and positioned himself alongside them. The dogs between them and the wall, if anything, the behavior wasn't aggressive. He appeared more guarded than before, resolved to remain with his family as well as everything he felt behind the wall. James carefully reinserted Oliver into a rush of appreciation swept over his crib. Him, because of Storm's steadfast vigilance, dogs possessed senses and instincts well beyond what is humanly possible, and it was evident that Storm was attempting to persuade something important. Visit from the house inspector couldn't arrive sooner. But in the interim, James took comfort in the knowledge that their devoted friend was keeping an eye on Storm's. Dedicated to keeping Oliver safe was unwavering assurance in silence that they were not confronted with this mystery. With himself that evening, after James eventually left to bed, leaving the Storm at his self-appointed post, that he was unable to abandon the sensation that they were about to, of finding something important he was thankful for. Whatever they had, rushed to warn them before it turned into a serious. James occasionally mirrored the issue, used the instincts of an animal to disclose what the senses of humans can miss about home. On Thursday, the inspector showed there on time morning, his piercing eyes instantly observing Storm's stiff, vigilant stance in the often. Nursery dogs are superior to any tool we employ, he said, putting the equipment back on the ground. They can detect things that our instruments may ignore, it like the sound of running water via a wood or pipe straining beneath. James clarified Storm's pressure pattern of behavior, while Margaret was Oliver, who was close to the inspector. Listened, he nodded cautiously. As he started he began the examination with fundamental measures to check for plumb on the walls and the levels of the floors. When he arrived at the corner where Storm was worried level, displayed a faint but discernible tilt, the inspector finds this intriguing. He pressed his fingers on the wall and pondered. With a moisture meter in hand, he ran it along the device's surface to determine its readout. Jumped a lot close to the Storm area. Had been seeing, there's unquestionably increased moisture content in this area, he verified. And notice how he pointed his shining a flashlight on the baseboards. exposing a hardly perceptible dark line storm remained near during the whole examination, his gaze never straying from when the inspector tapped the corner. The dog's ears perked up at the wall, and a quiet whimper came out of his throat. It didn't sound like his regular evening growls that seemed more frantic, as though verifying that someone else has finally observed what he had been attempting to convey. After that, the inspection continued. Carefully, with each step exposing growingly concerning results, I apologize for the disruption prior to moving forward with the story. I respectfully request that you enjoy the video and follow this channel. It's really vital to us. Many thanks. The inspector found a lot of substantial external water damage, brick, indicating a gutter that is deteriorating as the most likely culprit rather than evaporating. During water from the heavy rains had been seeping in, the wall gap gradually jeopardizing the vibrations that you have observed. He clarified that they are most likely from water. Passing through weaker materials such as loosened bricks or decaying wood, was obvious that the problem had been growing over a period of time, and immediately it would be required to make repairs in order to avoid additionally damage. The problem has been getting worse because due to the exceptionally rainy April that during the day, the inspector clarified that the W is caused by the sun heating the wall, moisture to rise and evaporate, but in the evening, when the temperature begins to drop, when moisture condenses, it returns. Down that repetitive motion is probably what your canine companion has been spotting. Subtle, but they have far better hearing. More sensitive than Margaret. Ours embraced Oliver more tightly. Expression. Expressing relief at having and justification and worry regarding the ramifications. The inspector continued with his assessment, taking pictures and making notes, taking careful notes. He discovered that the problem had extended to the crawl area underneath, where the moisture was beginning to jeopardize the assistance buildings. If this had persisted for several more months, you will remain unnoticed. Might have encountered serious structural issues. He soberly cautioned the harm would have continued to grow, perhaps endangering the stability of this whole area. Of the most likely, your dog saved you from it. The inspector stated that the issue was far more serious. With a gesture of James, showed Pat Storm respect by reaching down to him, who was now at last a little more relaxed that other people were recognizing the danger he had been identifying. The inspector suggested prompt fixes, stressing that although grave, the situation might be completely resolved with the right care. He supplied them with an in-depth study and directed them to a number of reliable contractors capable of handling both the problems with exterior water and the inside harm. That night, while they awaited Storm, is estimated by the contractor, kept up his vigilant stance by the crib, yet something was different with his manner. His growls were nearly gentler, as though he realized assistance was at last. James and Margaret moved Oliver's house as they arrived, crib to their room for a short time after the recommendation of the inspector until the repairs might be finished, while James saw Storm acclimating to the new sleeping configuration, pursuing them with one to their bedroom. Taking one final look around the nursery nook, he felt a great deal of appreciation for his canine's persistence. Storm discovered a significant issue weeks before anyone noticed, and his instincts for protection have quite potentially avoided a hazardous circumstance. From the contractor started working on the development next week, and what they found out made James feel special. Race when they opened the wall and discovered that there was much more water damage. More thorough than the first examination had made the wooden support beam visible. It had deteriorated as it ran through that corner, notably, and sections of the wall. The cavity was filled with mold. The contractor clarified that the Storm had been hearing noises that were perhaps as a result of the weakened beam moving beneath the weight of the house. The dog wasn't merely alerting you about the water. The contractor shook his head in agreement. Astonishment. This beam might have collapsed. These ancient homes sprang out of nowhere, occasionally conceal their issues until there as well. James, who was late, observed as the workers the harm, thinking was meticulously documented. How many nights had the storm lasted? Guards seeing the threat that was there, Margaret decided to take a break behind that wall. From instructing to supervising the repairs while James was at work, she observed how Storm's actions evolved as the project advanced, rather than his nervous snarling in the evening. He now observed the contractors closely observing them as they swapped out the damaged elements that the employees liked. Four-legged supervisor was astounded by his ability to perk up each time they came near the previously problematic corner. The neighborhood vet, who had first looked at Storm during their worry, visited to see how he was doing. She explained that canines are able to pick up on minute vibrations and noises at frequencies much beyond human. Storm's hearing wasn't just a perception. Either the creaking or the sound of the water timber, she explained. He was most likely recognizing the general instability of dogs' bodies themselves have an exceptional ability to recognize when something about their environment feels leaving. As the pairs proceeded, James and Margaret found that a number of other homes in their community had comparable problems, but none had been discovered as early as Margaret. Their next-door neighbor had her home examined following the hearing regarding their experiences and discovered similarities: water damage that started in her walls. The contractor clarified that the unusual weather trends had impacted numerous residences in the neighborhood one night when James observed the sunset by the sheeting of plastic that covered the nursery wall for a while. Seeing Storm acting in a different way than his typical alert, the dog snarled and remained in a calm position. On his bed while seeing the cleanup crew for the day, the apparent alleviation in Storm's behavior supported James's had misjudged their loyal friend, realized at last that the threat was it took 2 weeks to pass the repairs. Finished. At which point Oliver kept napping in his Storm in the parents' chamber, adapted to the temporary situation. But he would continue to conduct routine inspections of the nursery, examining the contractor's work with what appeared to approval. The employees made jokes about the Storm. Was the quality control they paid the closest attention to. Inspector James frequently related their tale. At the park with other parents, emphasizing the importance of observation. Their animals' behavior allows them to see beyond our consciousness, he would remark as Storm gently played with Dan appears to be on their picnic blanket. Such as strange conduct that may not be strange at all. They're attempting to say something important to the community's veterinary. James was even requested by the clinic to discuss their encounter during a workshop for pet owners, utilizing Storm's narrative to demonstrate how animals are often able to identify threats in the home. Margaret, before people noticed them, made a straightforward lay presentation that included images showing the damage to the wall and Storm's being watchful and assisting other families recognize the significance of taking warnings from their pets as the repairs drew closer. Conclusion: James considered how near they had discovered a possible catastrophe if it hadn't been so steadfast in his cautions, if they had dismissed his actions as being straightforward. The result could be worry or jealousy, have been quite dissimilar. They received assurances from the contractor that the new waterproofing techniques and support beams would avoid any such problems in the future. Storm received a lot of praise and provided with additional snacks throughout this time frame, during which he felt the most satisfied seemed to originate from discreetly maintaining and keep an eye on Oliver during their everyday the nightly growlings. Activities completely halted and replaced by serenity. Peaceful snoozes close to the recently restored. James frequently found himself stopping at the wall, in the doorway of the nursery, thankful for the relationship between his kid and their observant protector. The day at last came to return Oliver's cot to the completely fixed. The walls in the nursery had been painted. The window frames are the same gentle golden. New and freshly sealed baseboards installed. The contractor had included additional waterproofing the walls outside and improved the gutter system to avoid any water in the future. Infiltration, particularly the hazardous rotten beam, was replaced. With a robust new assistance, James and Margaret observed anxiously as the Storm moved into the repaired. Both of them are wondering how he'd react. The dog went about his routine patrol, root nose cautiously moving along the baseboards with particular focus on the corner he had been worried about for so long. Few weeks following a comprehensive examination, Storm happily flopped down in his preferred location. By the window that provides no growls or indications of worry, his calm manner provided the final confirmation that they had been looking for that night, as they put Oliver's initial descent into his crib within weeks. The shift was amazing how sturdy the room felt and safe, and without any indication of the draft that had once roused the infant. Mobile Storm took up his customary posture, close to the crib. However, rather than standing, he slept well, snarling and vigilant, raising his head now and then to make sure on Oliver before returning to, "Did you like this story? What do you think? You consider the relationship between dogs and kids. Is it possible for it to exist, or is it also it's dangerous to leave them?" Let us know in the comments together. Please let us know if you enjoyed the story below. Please leave a comment and subscribe to this channel, as this tale demonstrates to us that those who genuinely care about us can preserve our lives. I really appreciate you listening. Have a fantastic time, and I'll see you in the next video. Day.